welcome back to Red Mug Music. I'm Brian, and today I'm going to be ranking Alice in Chains' 8 studio albums. Now, what they say is Alice in Chains doesn't really make a bad album, so you would think that would make it difficult to rank them, but I definitely have my favorites, and I definitely think they're stronger albums than others, but I can pretty much put any album on and listen to it and enjoy it perfectly fine. Unlike Duran Duran, there were some albums that I just like to avoid altogether. With Alice in Chains, I can listen to them all. So anyway, if you're not familiar with Alice in Chains, they're a band that formed in 1987 in Seattle, and it was basically a rock band. But then they became part of the grunge movement in the early 90s. Now, everybody thinks that Nirvana, Nevermind, is pretty much the beginning of grunge, but it really wasn't. Actually, the first album the first full-length album Alice in Chains put out was actually put out a year before Nevermind. And I was lucky enough to be one of those people who saw that and got the album. And it was glorious. I mean, it was such a breath of fresh air. But anyway, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to rank them, and I'm going to start at number 8. Now, there's 3 EPs. Now, if you don't know what an EP is, it's basically a shorter album. It's not a full-length album, so they call them EPs. And a full-length album is called an LP. But they had 3 EPs, and one I didn't include because I kind of consider it, actually the first one they did, I kind of consider it a single. And I just didn't really, I don't want to put that in there. So we're just going to have 8 albums to review and to rank. So number 8 is going to be the EP Sap. Now, Sap was made in 1982. It was released in 82. And it was mostly acoustic, and it featured, and I didn't know this, and I guess if I would listen to it closer, which you can tell I didn't really listen to it that much, it has Ann Wilson from Heart. She sings on the album as well as Chris Cornell. Everybody knows Chris Cornell from Soundgarden and Audio Slave and solo efforts. And also Mark Arm for Mudhoney. All 3 of those had singing parts on the album. Of course, Lane Staley and Jerry Cantrell did as well. But this album was released directly to the store. They didn't do any promotions, no ads, no nothing. They just wanted to throw it out there after the Facelift album just for Alice in Chains fans. They just, because if I'm an Alice in Chains fan, I'm going to go looking, at the album Facelift, and I'm going to, out of nowhere, see this album called Sap. And so it was kind of like a nice bonus for fans of Alice in Chains. But anyway, it had singles like Got Me Wrong, which later became pretty famous due to MTV. Actually, what was that called? Oh, MTV Unplugged. That's where a lot of people heard a few of the songs from Sap. But still, for the most part, I don't listen to the album. I'm not the biggest fan. I do listen, but it's just not my favorite. So it'll come in at number 8. Then at number 7 is going to be, now this album, actually I had it as high as 3 or 4, which again tells you how good all these albums are. But when I went back to listen to it with a critical ear, I started noticing when you get past the first couple of songs, it started to drop off. And given the fact that it's a good album, but given the fact that it just didn't stay as strong as it started, I decided maybe the album is not as great as the rest of them. So I went ahead and slotted it in at number 7, and that is Black Gives Way to Blue. Now, this is the first album that featured lead singer William Duvall. This is after Lane Staley's death, and they had to put somebody in place, and that ended up being William. And I think he was the perfect addition to the band. If it weren't for him, I don't think Alice in Chains would have went any longer. I think they would have retired and called it quits at that point. But he's a nice compliment to Jerry Cantrell's his voice. They harmonized really well together. And when you listen to William, you hear that Lane Staley sound, but nobody could match that whatsoever. So I think they did a really good job with choosing him. Otherwise, I don't know who they have gotten. Actually, I've had these ideas that maybe they could have gotten Ann Wilson from Heart to be that lead singer, because she has an amazing voice, and I know there's a history. Like I said, she sang on the first album. And I've heard her do other stuff with Alice in Chains, just the live performances, which are amazing. Check that out. Just type in Alice in Chains and Ann Wilson, and you'll get a nice treat. But after All Secrets Known and Check My Brain, which are two of my favorite Alice in Chains songs out there, when you get past those two, maybe a few more, I really enjoy it. Like I said, it just drops off. So I actually pushed them down to number 7 just because of that. Okay, coming in at number 6 is their newest effort that came out in 2018, Ranier Fog. Ranier Fog has a companion web series called Black Antenna. Now, what Black Antenna is, and you can look this up on YouTube, it was a complement to the album, and it featured 10 songs from the album. And as they played, they pretty much had like a short movie. And it was pretty cool. So you should definitely go check it out, but make sure you watch it in the right order. But don't watch it with your kids around, because it is definitely for adults only. But it's a good story. It's interesting coming from them. But anyway, I like the album a lot. All the songs from beginning to end are really strong. My favorite song on the album is Drone, which they didn't release. They ended up releasing the one, So Far Under, Never Fade, and Ranier Fog, which are all extremely strong songs, but my favorite is Drone. I wish I would have released that too, but I guess it doesn't matter because I can listen to it either way. But anyway, being as strong as the album is, and this is actually the album that made me listen to Alice in Chains again. I kind of dropped off with Dinosaurs and Black Gives Away, because I don't know, I wasn't really willing to accept the fact that Lane Staley was gone and they replaced him with someone else. But when Ranier Fog came out, I realized that William Duvall is an absolute wonderful compliment to the album, or to the band. So I gave him a chance again, and I'm glad I did. So coming in at number 5 is the album Alice in Chains. Now, you may remember that because it had the three-legged dog on the front. People call it Tripod. They call it the Dog Album, the Dog Record, either way. This was the last album that was recorded with Lane Staley as lead vocal. Actually, on that record, Jerry Cantrell started to sing more. And I'm glad he did, because I think it helped the future of Alice in Chains, him incorporating his vocals into the album. I mean, Lane Staley, I can listen to him sing all day long. But Jerry Cantrell and Lane Staley together, their harmony is just fabulous. It's one of the best. I like particular songs off of this record in whole. I'm not a fan of the mood that comes from it. Jerry Cantrell himself said that this record had a lot more sadness, and it wasn't crafted as well as the first two albums, Facelift and Dirt. I was really ready to hear more of that, but I got Alice in Chains, that record instead. And I really didn't like it as much, but still one of the best ones out there. And it's a very important album because it's the last one with Lane Staley. All right, so at number 4 is an album that at first when I heard it, I didn't really give it much thought. Like I said, when I didn't really pay attention to Alice in Chains until Ranier Fog came out, and then I went back to listen to the previous two with William Duvall. I think it's a really good sounding album. The guitars are really good. They sound great. William Duvall and Jerry Cantrell singing like harmony together is wonderful. I don't think they really get too far away from a particular type of sound. I think they went to the studio with a certain idea, maybe, or once they got an idea, they kind of stuck to it. So there's not a lot of different types of sound. It's basically a one thought album. Maybe that's why at first I didn't really give it a lot of thought, but when you go back and listen to it, song after song, it's so solid. So this has actually become one of my favorite albums. Well, my fourth favorite album by Alice in Chains. But they had releases like Hollow, Stone, and Voices, and it was wonderful. Love it. This is a very good album. And once I went back to listen to it critically, to try to figure out where it would rank, that's when I realized how good this album really is. So again, it's really important to listen to an album from beginning to end and get some kind of an emotional, try to have an emotional response from what they're trying to do, because they're telling a story. So try to figure out what that story is. All right, now coming in at number 3, when I first heard of Alice in Chains, they had released the album Facelift. Now, again, like I said before, it was like a year before Nevermind came out from Nirvana. So this was really one of the first grunge albums to be released, and to kind of pave that way for the rest of the grunge scene, especially out of Seattle, to become known. And this Facelift is a really important album. It's when I first listened to it, I had no idea what I was hearing. This was something so different from anything I'd heard before. I was previously listening to a lot of, alternative stuff, like REM and Cure, but it still came to me as way different. They're using the drop D guitars, the irregular time signatures, the key changes, just everything about it was just mind-blowing and trippy. And it's almost like I just could not understand what I was listening to, but I did know it was amazing, and I did know I needed to listen to it over and over again. So this was an extremely important album, and it'll always be one of my favorites. So that's why I put them at number 3. And now number 2. Number 2 is actually another EP, and the name of that EP is Jar of Flies. Jar of Flies came out in 1994, and it was their second acoustic EP. Originally planned, okay, here's how they did it. They originally planned like 10 days in the studio, and they just got their new bassist, Mike Inez, and he replaced their previous bassist, which they fired and then shortly after that passed away. They wanted to go into the studio and record some music and just kind of feel them out and see what that chemistry was like. Apparently really good, because they had no intentions on releasing this album. They were just, figuring things out. But what happened after that is after recording the album, the record company, I guess, it got their attention, and they're like, we got to release this. And I'm glad they did. It's got some really strong stuff, and it's basically all acoustic. They ended up releasing No Excuses, I Stay Away, and Don't Follow. 3 very solid songs. I don't know about you, but I very often listen to this album and I sing the whole thing. Definitely not around other people, because that's embarrassing, but the chemistry was fantastic, and I kind of wish they would put out more acoustic albums like this. And like Sap, you're able to hear a lot of these songs on the MTV Unplugged album, so you can check that out as well. And there's like 7 songs on the album, so it's hardly an EP anyway. So I pretty much just consider it a regular album, but it's still considered an EP. But one of my favorites, and that's why I put them at number 2. Okay, number 1. The best album that Alice in Chains has ever done, and I don't think they'll ever beat this ever, is Dirt. Now, Dirt came out in 1992, and it was their second full-length album, coming right after Facelift. And And like I said about Facelift, Facelift was a very important album to the grunge scene altogether, and being Alice in Chains' first album to come out. Dirt is one of the most influential grunge albums to ever be released. So, and probably in the top 10 of my favorite albums of all time. This album sounds a lot like Facelift, but it's actually a lot darker. I know there's a lot of references to drug usage, and of course Lane Staley was battling drug addiction this whole time, but I kind of feel like he was predicting his own death, because he's talking about, you know, doing drugs and the effects of drugs, and then I think he moves on to the negative effects of drugs, you know, how bad that they are, and the kind of life you live when you're in that sort of thing. And also there was a lot of talk about or lyrics about relationships. So it was just really dark, but Lane Staley's voice was absolutely brilliant. Definitely an album that will always be important to me, and I'll continue to listen to it probably on a weekly basis. They released songs like Wood, Them Bones, Angry Chair, Rooster, Down in the Hole. Down in the Hole is one of my favorite songs that they've done as well. But fantastic album. If you haven't listened to it, listen to it. Start from the beginning, go all the way through the end. Check out the whole thing. Listen to them all. You'll be, if you've never really listened to Alice in Chains before, give them a shot. Listen to all the albums. They are fantastic. Okay, guys, that was it. That's the conclusion of my ranking of Alice in Chains' 8 studio albums. I hope you enjoyed it. Comment down below. Let me know what your number one is. I would be very shocked to see if it's not Dirt. I think Dirt is by far in a tier all by itself. So I just can't imagine somebody liking another album more than that one. But if you do, let me know. And also, you didn't know this was going to happen, but pop quiz. Which album did Ann Wilson sing on? I said it in my video, so the first person to answer in the comments down below will get their name mentioned in the next video. So which album did Ann Wilson sing on? Comment down below, let me know. And any other comment that you want to put down there, go ahead. Let's talk about Alice in Chains. It's my favorite subject. All right, that's it for this week. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and like my video. I'd really appreciate that. Every time I have a new video come out, you'll be the first to know, which should be every Sunday. And until next week, I will see you later.